Welcome back to another episode of the Diabetes Digital Podcast. Today, we have a very special guest for you. We are talking with Bria Gadd, also known as the Period Whisperer. I love that name, and I wish I would have had a period whisperer when I first got my period. We are going to be packing what is really happening in the body during perimenopause. Bria explores the connection between hormone fluctuations and blood sugar, how to spot early signs, and why symptoms like fatigue and cravings are real and valid. Whether you've been navigating perimenopause for a while or you're just beginning to notice changes, this conversation will leave you informed, supported, and more connected to what your body needs. Perimenopause is one of those things that is not talked about enough, and many women are left feeling unprepared for the changes that it brings. So we are thrilled to have this conversation with Bria. And just a reminder that if you have perimenopause or menopause, if you have prediabetes, PCOS, diabetes, and you want personalized support from one of our dietitians, we do offer insurance-covered counseling. So make sure you check us out at diabetesdigital.co. And we are going to hop into this episode. Welcome to the Diabetes Digital Podcast. I'm Wendy.
And I'm Jess, and we're best friends, registered dietitians, and diabetes educators.
Through our telehealth platform, diabetesdigital.co, we offer accessible and personalized virtual nutrition counseling for people with diabetes and prediabetes.
Visit diabetesdigital.co, that's C-O, to book your first appointment. We accept insurance and offer affordable self-pay options. Now, let's get into today's episode.
This podcast is brought to you by Hero Bread. As dietitians, we're always on the hunt for store-bought foods that we can confidently recommend to our patients. But here is the catch. Anything we recommend has to actually taste good. Life is short, and I both live to eat and eat to live. That's when Hero Bread reached out. I'd seen them in stores, but I hadn't picked anything up yet, and they had sent a bunch of products for us to try. Now, my husband and I, we love food, and we were immediately hooked. Hero Bread isn't just tasty, it's functional too. Each serving has 0 to 2 grams of net carbs, no sugar, and 4 to 10 grams of protein depending upon the product. So the Hawaiian rolls, for example, which are new and I love, they have 4 grams of protein per serving. It's perfect for managing blood sugar or adding more protein while eating the bread you love. Their tortillas are a new favorite in my house. My husband and I both love using them to make quesadillas as quick snacks. I'm a big quesadilla girl. I've also been using their bread for sandwiches. I love making a sandwich for lunch because it's easy and it's filling, but I am picky about bread. It has to be the best part. And here's the thing, sometimes breads with health claims tend to be dry and disappointing, but not this one. Hero Bread is moist, chewy, and really, truly satisfying. Their hamburger buns are also perfect for my vegetarian patties, and the extra protein helps me hit my daily protein goals. Now, whether you're looking to manage your blood sugar or you just want to enjoy a delicious bread option with added protein and prebiotic fiber, Hero Bread is a simple and tasty option. Ready to give it a try? Visit hero.co to shop their full lineup and use our special coupon code DD10, that's DD as in Diabetes Digital 10, to get 10% off at checkout. And don't forget, they also offer free shipping for orders over $50. That's hero.co. Now, on to the episode.
Welcome to the podcast, Bria.
Thanks, Wendy. I'm super excited to be here.
Yay. All right. So gonna jump right in. We were chatting about perimenopause. Our co-host Jess, she was diagnosed with perimenopause in her mid-30s. And up until then, I didn't even know what that was. I thought you went from like having a period to going straight into menopause. And so we have covered it a little bit on the podcast before, but I'm curious to know like what your experience has been and how you got into this line of work.
Yeah, for sure. I think, I was amazed when I got into this work. I realized like 50% of women don't know the difference between perimenopause and menopause. I mean, I'm surprised it's not larger. Like I didn't know, and I was in the wellness industry, and that's really how I learned about it because I had primarily, built a career in fitness and nutrition, through my late 20s, all through my 30s. And, when I was raising young kids, and then around 35, 36, 37, first, I started noticing changes in my clients. Like they just didn't have the same energy, the same stamina, the same recovery, especially in their fitness, and were more tired. And then I really noticed it in me. And I thought, it's so funny because you think you have something figured out. Like when you work, I'm like, well, I have my wellness figured out. I don't have other things. But it really threw me for a loop. I was stopped sleeping very well. My periods did get a little wonky, which was super unusual for me, those two markers in particular. But I hadn't really changed anything. I put on some extra weight and I was having a lot more cravings and a real energy suck. Those were kind of the big things and some big time increase in anxiety. And that was what kind of took me from Google searching things, which was never very helpful, to going to my healthcare practitioner, who was wonderful, did all the things, like ran all the tests, asked all the questions, and just kind of was like, you're the picture of health.
Mm-hmm.
That was kind of, so glad I don't have any of the awful things that come up when I Google. But I remember thinking, I'm 37. And if this is how I feel at 37, like, I don't know, like, how am I going to swing this another 37 years? That was what really pivoted things for me into better understanding the function of my body and not just the physicality of it. And it's where I really discovered sex hormones and just took me in an entirely different direction.
That's so good that you had a doctor that listened to you and that was able to diagnose you. Because I remember when Jess was going through it, she had to go through 8 doctors to get a diagnosis because it was getting overlooked because they were like, oh, it must be something else. And like she wasn't sleeping at that point for months. Like she just had terrible sleep. She was going through it. And so you mentioned fatigue, poor sleep. Are there any other symptoms that people should look out for? And like, is there a specialty doctor that one should see that would be better at like diagnosing perimenopause?
Yeah, well, and technically perimenopause isn't a diagnosable condition. I mean, I think probably with Jess, it was like early menopause.
Mm-hmm.
Perimenopause is really, it's essentially the beginning of the retirement of your ovaries and your reproductive system. It's like they picked up the torch, the new job in puberty, and now they're like, okay, time to transition out, which is a big deal for the rest of the body because they've carried a pretty important role for a while, but not a role that's essential for life, one that can help us with some vitality. So I think, I always think it's so important first to pay attention to your own body, to kind of bring things back to some key foundational pieces that about your own body. But I think it's so dependent these days in healthcare. And I think the other thing is when you go to a doctor, their job is to diagnose something physically. And if there's nothing physically wrong with you, then we know it's functional. So I often recommend either, if you think it's your hormones, either work with a menopause doctor or perimenopause specialist, a female hormone specialist, or work with a functional practitioner like myself, because you're going to get into those whys a little bit more.
Mm-hmm. And then aside from the fatigue and the sleep, are there any other symptoms that people should look out for?
Yeah, for sure. I think a lower capacity to handle stress is really a noticeable one. Lack of recovery from fitness. So if you are into fitness, unexplained weight gain or undeserved, we'll call it, where you haven't really changed anything and things are changing, and absolutely changes in your menstrual cycle. That's like one of our key signs of health as a woman, and we really haven't been taught about it. So if you aren't tracking, I would track. And then if you notice changes, more symptoms, heavier periods, different colors in your cycle, those are really, I think, key indicators that something is off in your sex hormones.
Okay. Yeah, those are really good to pay attention to. So we focus on insulin resistance, prediabetes, PCOS. Have you noticed any fluctuations in blood sugar as people are approaching perimenopause and menopause? Is there anything that you've picked up on?
Yeah, I love that. There's a huge correlation here. The whole body's like an orchestra. It all works together in the systems. But what typically happens in this, this transition of retirement, we'll call it, is that first, estrogen starts to decline and fluctuate along with progesterone. And when we're talking about like insulin and glucose, when estrogen declines, it lowers our insulin sensitivity specifically because it plays a protective role in blood sugar regulation by supporting our insulin sensitivity, like, as you know, and I'm sure your listeners know, like how well our cells respond to insulin. It also helps glucose move from the bloodstream into cells for energy. And so as it fluctuates and declines, especially estradiol, which is kind of our most robust form of estrogen, your cells can become more resistant to insulin. So it means our blood sugar is staying elevated longer. It means over time, we might be getting more insulin resistant.
Mhm.
That's just with estrogen declining. And then, of course, when progesterone starts to drop, which typically for most people happens first and then the estrogen, we have more cortisol reactivity. So it like typically progesterone really buffers our cortisol, our stress hormone in perimenopause. But as it drops, you start to lose that kind of calming effect and you become more stress reactive, which, when cortisol is around, it raises blood sugar as a part of that fight or flight response. Then it kind of encourages that blood sugar instability, more crashes, more cravings. So I think when we're really talking about the impact of sex hormones on insulin and glucose, that's what we can see there.
Yeah, and it's definitely a domino effect where, with the cortisol and the insulin resistance, and then that ends up affecting your mood and your energy, and then it affects how you're sleeping, and then the sleeping is also affecting the insulin resistance. It's just like,
And makes it harder to make certain food choices. I mean, when
yeah.
your body's stressed or it doesn't have enough energy from sleep, it's going to crave quick energy, which is always sugar in some form, which makes that even more complex for our body.
Yeah, sleep is really hard. I mean, because I remember like when Jess was going through and she was telling me that it was like months of just exhaustion. I'm like, I would be miserable. It affects everything. And with it being a common symptom with perimenopause, what is the underlying factor there? What is causing that?
Yeah, I mean, of course, there can be many options, but I would say like 80% of the time, if you are waking up, well, there's a few different parts of sleep. If you're struggling to fall asleep, I think usually that comes down to, again, cortisol dysregulation.
Mhm,
So
okay.
the cortisol's not coming down at night the way it should, and then our melatonin's not coming up. So we kind of have one problem there. But to kind of bring it back to, I think, blood sugar and like relevance here,
Mhm,
you are waking up multiple times a night and or specifically between those like witching hours of 2 and 4 a.m. We always, I think, kind of bring it back to cortisol and then where is that cortisol coming from? And often it's blood sugar dysregulation. So I find most of my clients, if they are waking up between 2 and 4 a.m. specifically, that's the time when our liver kind of does itself clean. So it needs some glucose at that time. And if there's not enough in there because our blood sugar is dysregulated, the brain calls for cortisol instead, and it comes, and then we wake up, and maybe we wake up in a sweat. Maybe we wake up and can't get back to sleep because that cortisol is kind of creating that spin, that fight or flight in the body.
mm, okay. And I'm curious to know, like, what nutritional changes were helpful for you? Because I'm sure that there's like appetite changes, there's preference changes, your metabolism is changing. So, what did you find helpful during this time?
Yeah, I think probably the most helpful thing and what I always work on first and foremost with my clients is stability and consistency of nutrition
Mhm.
first and foremost. So that means waking up, eating within 1 to 2 hours of waking up, and then paying attention enough to figure out how much do I need to eat in that meal to last me 4 or 5 hours, because that's going to help tell us that we're regulating, that we're getting enough in that time frame. Everyone wants to know like how much I should eat, what I should eat, and only you get to know that. So for your own body, so that paying attention, right? These regular meals every 4 to 5 hours, if it has to be three, so be it. But I really like 4 to 5 hours. If it's got to go longer, we have that snack to really create that kind of consistent energy drip into the body. So that would be number one tip. And the other thing that I find really, really helpful, besides having a balanced meal, right? Like making sure we're having protein, fats, and carbohydrates, like fiber filled carbohydrates, we'll call them, is the order that you eat your food. And maybe you guys have talked about this already, but it's such a great little hack for blood sugar regulation. I find, let's say at lunch you're going to have a salad and a sandwich with meat or something in it. If you have the salad first or you have your vegetables first, that kind of slows down the absorption of the higher glucose spiking foods. So even just eating your food in an order of carbohydrates, like those vegetables first, and then your protein and fats, and then your carbohydrates, is a really simple way without adding much stress to your life to help with that.
Yeah, I love that. And also in thinking about satiety, I love what you were saying about pairing foods. And I think that the more foods you add to that combination, the longer you're going to be satiated for. Because oftentimes people might think like, okay, well, I'm going to try to eat healthier and have like a chicken salad or something like that. And they really cut back on carbohydrates.
Yeah.
And then next thing you know, they're hungry like an hour later.
Yes, I totally agree. I mean, that's a beautiful message from your body. If you are hungry like less than 3 hours after eating, you didn't eat enough and not enough of a mixture for your body. So we can go back to our meal and say, okay, well, tomorrow, how do I either increase my protein and fats? How do I make sure it's more well rounded and I have those carbohydrates? So you can just play with it a little bit for yourself. And ultimately, Wendy, I feel like it's the best meal plan advice. You're like just listening to feedback
Yeah.
from your own self, and we don't have to pay for more meal plans.
Exactly. I know. Yeah. We talk about that all the time, intuitive eating, but it's just so hard for people because you're constantly getting these messages and the meal plans online and the hacks and the this and the that for blood sugar regulation. And now there's a lot of stuff for perimenopause out there too. And it's like people get so confused and it's totally understandable because it's like, okay, what should I be doing? But I love what you said about really listening to those messages and using your body's signals as a guide. That's like your best, that is your best compass, I feel, when it comes to nutrition.
Yes, 100%. And I always want to say to women, like, you don't have to do it forever. I think if you really just decide this is what I'm going to focus on for, I mean, I'd say for women, if you're cycling, probably a month would be ideal because then you're getting a full cycle. But even 2 weeks of paying attention and then moving on,
Mhm.
is enough to keep you from having like cyclical food thoughts, from having blood sugar dysregulation if you really tune in. And then of course, if you need help, you can get that help.
Absolutely. I want to talk a little bit about the impact that this might have on someone's mental health, like going through this transition.
Yeah.
I'm sure physically it's a lot to handle, but also emotionally, like it's a big change and just kind of wrapping your head around like, wow, my body is really changing. I'm entering a new phase of life. And if I could imagine if someone is dealing with pretty harsh symptoms, that can be really hard to deal with as well. So what do you think might be helpful during that time just for like emotional coping?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think when you're thinking about, again, a retirement, like, so something's transitioning out, like any transition in life, it's an added workload, right? So it's more energy demand. So at the very least, I think we always need to look at, okay, more is happening. So there's more demand energy in my body. So can I decrease demand in other ways? Maybe, maybe not. That just is going to depend on your life. But how do I really increase my energy supply? And I think we can look to some of the key ways of increasing sleep, of course. But if your sleep's disrupted, I just am always a believer in like, just hold the space for the sleep. Have the consistency of when you go to bed, the consistency of when you get up, that make sure that that space is held. This making sure you're prioritizing this nutrition piece. So we're getting that fuel in. And then I think pleasure is an underrated way to help us feel better, right? Like all transition is challenging, all transition is new. And in perimenopause, the fluctuating of our sex hormones does impact the part of our brain that like memory codes and retrieves. So that can dig up things that we've thought we'd put to bed or maybe just stuffed somewhere inside of us emotionally. So things
Mhm.
can start to surface. So I think that my focus is always bringing things back to like habit and consistency in your main health pillars. When do I eat? When do I sleep? When do I move? And when do I play? And if you're too stressed to play, then we need to work on the stress to create space for the play. Because, Wendy, we do this like whether you're a parent or not, you probably have an animal. Like we create routine for our kids and our dogs. Like it is something that we know so well that provides, and our bodies are no different. We've just kind of gotten away from it. So I think that taking space, listening to your body, asking for help, but always being solid on like, okay, did I sleep today? Did I eat today? Did I move my body today? And did I find time to either breathe or laugh today? And those things alone can really create stability in a rickety time.
Yes. Yeah, that's so helpful. And with sleep, because I think just like people in general struggle with sleep. And I'm curious to know like what rituals or like tips you have that help you get a good nighttime routine.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I'm a big believer in staying off screens an hour before bed. I think
Okay.
we hear this one a lot. Or if you need to be on a screen, or if you want to watch TV, make sure it's not like a personal screen. Like sit down on the couch with your loved one or by your whatever. Watch it a bit further away. Maybe put on some blue light blockers, and take a little time to do some deep breathing. I mean, most of these things all come down from to stress and the central
Mhm.
nervous system, right? Insulin resistance is going to be impacted by stress. Our sex hormones are impacted by stress. So if we can take a hot minute and just breathe and bring us back down into calm, that can be really helpful. I'm a huge fan of going for a walk after dinner. Again, a lot of people have dogs, like walk your dog after dinner. It's 10, 20 minutes, not only regulates our blood sugar better, but it just calms that body down. And then first thing in the morning, I actually, two things. I have started to hit snooze on my alarm and just listen to a 5-minute meditation. I have a hard time
Mm.
creating space for meditation in my life. And I think there's a lot of highly productive people and women that struggle with that too.
Yeah.
So I'll just like listen to 5 minutes then just to kind of, again, keep the body calm, not long, just that snooze time. And I like to at least like get outside for a minute. So again, get your pet out for a walk, go for a 10-minute walk, just stick your feet in the ground if it's not freezing where you live, but get that sunlight in your eyes and that'll help regulate that circadian rhythm, which will again impact stress, impact sex hormones, impact hunger hormones.
Yeah, that makes all the difference. I recently started going out for walks. I don't even do it every day. Like sometimes I'll just go out to my balcony to get a little bit of sunlight.
Yes.
But the days that I actually do go out and I'm more like immersed in the park and things like that, it makes all the difference with like energy levels and mood. And yeah, I think the walking is super important, especially after meals, because it could just be super quick. And if you're having some issues with insulin resistance, that can also be really helpful as well.
And it feels so much better. Your meal,
Yeah,
you get like a little bit of movement. It's nothing intense. And it just kind of keeps us all, I think, more calm and regulated in general.
agreed. Well, in wrapping, I would love to go over one myth that you'd like to clear up when it comes to perimenopause.
Yeah, there's so many here. It's a tough one. But I think, you know, the idea that there's nothing you can do about it and that it's just your hormones changing, I think
Mm,
is total baloney. Don't get me wrong. Again, transitions cause stress, they cause more work on the body. But in Chinese herbal medicine, they talk about menopause and perimenopause as your second spring. And I really believe if we understand our hormones, you can see that really from puberty until menopause, we've kind of been hormonally hijacked every single month in the name of reproduction. Like there's a reason for it where estrogen rises and it's like rose colored glasses and it makes us amenable to put everyone else ahead of us, to procreate and put our children ahead of us. And that is going away. And now what's left is how we really feel. And I think when we don't have that kind of drug of estrogen coming in all the time, although there's beautiful benefits to it, I think we get to really make stuff happen. It's when we really get to be like, oh, this is really bugging me. Like all month long, it's bugging me, not just.
yeah.
So I think it's really perimenopause is the gift that kind of highlights things that weren't working for us anyway, but youth kind of allowed us to like ignore. And it's the time to deal with those mess things that your body's telling you so that you can have the next 40 years like living your best life.
hmm Yeah, that's a great way to think about it because it's not doomsday. It's like shifting mindset. And like, this is actually an opportunity to get to know yourself in a different way. I really love that.
Yeah. Thank you.
Amazing. Well, Bria, for listeners who want to connect with you, where can they check out your work? Do you have a website? What's your socials? Give us everything.
Yeah, for sure. So you can always hop over to the website and see what's going on there. It's briatheperiodwhisperer.com, or come hang out on Instagram. I love hanging out there at Bria_period_whisperer. It's a mouthful. And or I have a podcast as well that I'm so excited to be having Wendy on soon. So
Yay.
it's called the Period Whisperer Podcast, anywhere you get your pods. If you want to learn more about your body as a woman, it's really what I talk about.
Amazing. Thanks, Bria. Thanks for joining us for today's episode. If you're interested in nutrition counseling with one of our expert dietitians to help improve your prediabetes or diabetes, visit us at diabetesdigital.co.
Also, if you found our conversation helpful, do us a favor and rate and review this podcast on iTunes, plus share with someone who might find this helpful. You can also connect with us on Instagram at diabetesdigital.co.
And tune in every Wednesday for practical, inclusive, and culturally humble diabetes insights. We'll catch you later. Bye.